After having good understanding on the Azure storage accounts, now we would move on to our next chapter, describe Azure Storage Redundancy, to learn things in detail. Now, when you hear a word redundancy, what comes to your mind? Azure Storage always stores multiple copies of your data. Azure Storage Redundancy means it is storing multiple copies of your data. And why are we doing it? If, let's say, in the data center or in the region where your data is there, if something goes wrong there, let's say there are hardware failures, or there is a power outage, or there is a natural disaster, or something happened, then what happens? If I don't store your copies, if Azure doesn't store your copies in multiple replicas of your data, then you might lose it. If there is a natural disaster, everything got destroyed, then with that your data is also destroyed. Now the question is, we saw multiple redundancy options, like locally redundancy storage we saw, right? Geo-Redundant Storage we saw, Zone-Redundant Storage, we saw multiple redundancy options. So how one can choose which one I should go with? Now for that, before choosing, you need to know how is your data replicated in the primary region. For this, I am in the datacenters.microsoft.com and I am going to move this and come to India. So here in India, if you see, there is a region called, let's say, Central India. If I click on it, it tells me Central India is a region and how many different availability zones I have. Available with 3 zones it has got. And this Central India is located in where? In Pune it is located. So you should know how is your data replicated in the primary region itself. In the Pune Microsoft Azure data center, how is your data replicated, right? And then if it is backed up to a distant secondary region for added safety. Now what does that mean? Just for an understanding purpose, just let's say Central India is a region. There is also another region called South India. This is another region. Now, is my data replicated to some other region? For example, here in this case, let me give you an example. Let's say Pune. Pune is my primary region where in the data center my data is there. Now, for safety reasons, is the data are backed up in the South India region or not? So this is what the point is talking about. If it is backed up to a distant secondary region for added safety or not. Whether you need to access to the secondary copy, let's say South India, in that region, do you need to access that copy if the main region faces your issues or not? If you have answer to these questions, this helps you to choose which redundancy option to go with. So now you have an idea what is a primary region. So we saw Pune, right, is as one of the region. Now how is the redundancy works there? Okay, let's see it. Data in Azure storage account always replicated 3 times in primary region. Remember this point, very important point. Always your data is replicated 3 times in primary region. For example, my primary region is Central India. So Central India is a region with availability zones. So Pune is the location where this data center from Microsoft is there. So this is my region. So what the rule says, it always replicated 3 times in the primary region. Always 3 times. Azure Storage account offers 2 options. What are those? LRS and the other one is ZRS. What is LRS? Locally redundant storage. And the second option is zone redundant storage. So Azure Storage account offers you 2 options. One is you can locally make 3 copies, and ZRS means in the zone you can make 3 copies. Let's see what is this locally redundant storage means. Replicates your data 3 times with a single data center in the primary region. Now, for example, Pune is what is the name of the primary region we saw? Pune. Now, Pune as a city, they might have multiple zones in the city. So within the city, in one place there is one data center. In another place of the city, there is another data center. In another place of the city, there is another data center. If I come back to the Pune region, you can see it clearly said available with 3 zones. So in the Pune city, there are 3 different zones available. That means imagine there are 3 different data centers in different parts of the city. So what it tells you, locally redundant means, let's say there are 3 areas or 3 parts of the city where these data centers are there. 3 data centers are there in Pune, for example. Now in any one data center which I have taken, in that data center, it is going to replicate my data 3 times. That means LRS provides at least 11 nines durability. So what is that? Let's clearly understand. 3 times with a single data center means what? Now you would have racks, the server racks. Now in one rack or in one device or one server, your data is there. Your primary data is there. Now that data will be replicated to another rack or another server or another hard drive where your data will be replicated. Similar way, it will go in the same data center. It is in the same data center. One more device or one more server or another rack on which the data would be stored. So in the same data center, in the same office, in the same location, you have got 3 devices in which your data is kept. So locally redundant. Now this promises you 11 nines durability. That means if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 99.999, that much kind of a durability you would get. This promises you durability. Your data would be available because your data is replicated in 3 different racks or 3 different hardwares. It is there in your 3 different hard drives. Now this is the lowest cost and offers least durability. Now why it is saying least durability? 99 is a very big number for me. Now why it is saying least durability? Let's see it. This one, the locally, if I am going to choose while I'm creating my storage account, let's say I've selected LRS, locally redundant storage. That means I am getting protection, right? I'm getting protection from what? Rack and hardware failures. So rack means this, you might have seen the server rooms, right? It has got iron kind of this one, and then you have hard drive, you have CPUs, there are many things in a rack. So let's say there are 3 racks in which my data is there. Let's say in one rack, something went wrong, the hard drive failed, something burnt in the first rack, but still my data is there in my second rack and third rack. So my data is available. Something happened to the second and third, still my data is running in the first one. So you get protection of your hardware failures. Hard drive went wrong or the CPU failed in that rack because of heat, right? Heating. Anything goes wrong in the hardware, your data is still protected. And what is that? 99.9999% you are protected. Now what it doesn't protect you, that is important. For example, flood happened in so I was taking example of Bangalore, electronic city. Just imagine electronic city, there is a data center. Now in that data center, in multiple devices, my data are kept. So that means if in one device, if hardware failure happens, my data is still there in the second device and third device. However, let's say something happened, flood happened. All the servers got flooded. Let's say fire happened, everything got burnt out. Natural disaster happened there. Okay, in that particular area. If something like that happens, it cannot protect you. That means if your hardwares are been destroyed by any reason, if they are destroyed, all your data is gone. You can't get your data back. All your data is lost because I have selected the LRS, and LRS is the lowest cost. Now this can happen very rarely. This will not happen, but if it happens, there is a disclaimer that you will lose all your data because you have taken LRS. Now what is the alternative? The alternative is you go with either ZRS. ZRS means Zone Redundant Storage, or else you go with Geo-Redundant Storage, or else you go with Geo-Zone-Redundant Storage. Now if you go with higher these things, of course the cost also goes high. So zone redundant service means what? Let's see it. Zone redundant storage, or popularly known as ZRS. Now this service or this storage service you will only get in the zone enabled regions. For example, if I click on Central India, this is a region. This region location is Pune. Now if I look at available with 3 zones, so Central India region has zones, you will say, correct? Now, this white one, India Central, India South Central. India South Central announced region with availability zones. So this is a region which is there in Hyderabad. For Azure, this is a region called India South Central. Now, this one currently doesn't have zones. Maybe in the future there will be zones, but at the moment of recording the video, currently I do not see zones for this region. So ZRS option or zone redundant storage option is available in the zone enabled regions only. Just now you saw the example. So in the central India, yes, you can go with this option, but currently in the Hyderabad region, right, there you cannot go with this option. So zone enabled regions only you can go with this option. ZRS provides at least 12 nines. There we saw LRS 11 nines. Now it is 12 nines of objects over a given year. Now you might think, what is the so big difference of 11 9, 12 9? There is a difference. There is always a difference when we look at the number of seconds, number of hours, it can go down. Okay. Yes. So if a zone goes down, your data is still available. So zone, what in your mind, you should be able to imagine when I say LRS, that means locally redundant storage. That means imagine, let's say you have to store your pictures. So those pictures are there on your phone. Then you give it to your family member, somebody's phone. You say you also keep these pictures. Then I will keep it on my computer. So there are 3 devices where my data is stored. Now it should not happen. Let's say something went wrong. Let's say fire, flood, something happened and all the 3 devices are lost. Then what happens? All your data is also lost with the devices. It can happen. So that is LRS. Now with zone redundant storage, what happens? Within the same city, you have another 2 data centers. So minimum 3 data centers are there in the same city. Let's say when you say Pune, in the Pune city, there are 3 different nearby locations. There are 3 different data centers. If locally something happened, fire, flood, any kind of disaster happened, still my data is there with another 2 regions. So taking the same example, now you have given those photos to one of your friend who stays in the same city. He has kept it on his computer. And you have called another friend whom you have again shared those photos, keep these photos with you. So he has kept it. So now your house, your first friend's house, your second friend's house within the same city has got your data. If something goes wrong with your house, still your data is there. If something goes with your friend's house, still your data is there. So you get more availability of your data. So similar way, right? Similar way, or something happens to the device, leave about top. If something happens to the device of your friend, still your data is there with other devices, with your friend and with you. So ZRS gives you more availability. You can imagine that. So within the city, I have got multiple data centers where my data is still present. So if a zone goes down, your data is still available. That means within the city, if one of the zone, one of the office, one of the data center goes down, still your data is there in other 2 data centers of the city. You getting it? So when zone unavailable, networking up. So when a zone goes down, so you know these zones are interconnected with optical fibers. So if one zone goes down, a flood happened or some power kind of a short circuit happened or something went wrong, for example, so what happens during that time? A networking update would happen. Now your application was using your primary zone. Now all of a sudden something went wrong. So what would happen? Automatically there will be networking updates would happen, such as DNS repointing. Your domain naming service repointing it to another zone. So all this would happen. Now during this time, your application, if you're trying to access, you might see some problem because the DNS changes and all these backend changes are happening. So after the change happened, if you open your application, you will be able to see your data. Okay. So it gives you high availability compared to LRS, local redundant storage. It gives you more higher availability. Restrict, and this is also good. One of the recommended solution if you don't want your data to go out of your region, go out of your state, it has to be there in your country. If such kind of a data governance things are there, you can also go with the ZRS option, wherein your data is not leaving your country, it is there in the selected region. You getting it? It is there in the selected region, and the reason is, if the region is enabled with the zone enabled, because all the regions are not zone enabled, right? You know it. Like Hyderabad, we saw currently there are no zones. It might come soon. But Pune has. So if I'm selecting Pune, so Pune has zone enabled, and I can go with GZRS service, and my data is there in India. That's all. My data is not going outside. So that way I'm getting redundancy. Also, my data is also secure and following the data governance if it is applicable. The next topic is redundancy in secondary region. So we saw the primary region. Now what is there in secondary region? Why it is? Let's see. For an application which requires high durability, if something happens in the primary region, still you want the data to be safe by going with the secondary region. So copy data from your storage account to a secondary region that is hundreds of miles away from the primary region. So you saw primary region, for example, Pune. I'm selecting my secondary region as Hyderabad. Right? So what is the purpose? You already know it. It's for high durability. Your data is available. If something goes wrong in a region, there's another region which can support. While creating storage account, you select the primary region. So while I'm creating a storage account, I'll be only selecting the primary region. Let's say I've selected Pune as my primary region. The moment I have selected, the paid secondary region is based on Azure region pairs and cannot be changed. You cannot decide what should be the secondary region. That is already decided by Azure region pairs. So based on that only you will get a secondary pair. Now there are two options for copying your data to secondary region. So what are these two options? You have GRS. We have learned about LRS, local redundancy storage. Now it is Geo-Redundant Storage. GRS is available. And then you have something called Geo-Zone-Redundant Storage with secondary region. These are the two options for copying your data to secondary region. Now if I go with the first option, GRS, GRS is similar to running LRS in two regions. So if I select the option GRS, then what happens? In my primary region, for example, let's take the example of Pune. In the Pune, in one of the data center, in 3 devices, my data is stored. And let's take the secondary region as Hyderabad. So in Hyderabad, in one data center, LRS, right? In one data center, LRS means single data center. In 3 devices, you have your data copied. So GRS is similar to running LRS in 2 regions. Now, global Geo-Zone-Redundant Storage, right? GZRS is similar to running ZRS, not LRS. So ZRS in the primary region. ZRS means in the same city, in 3 different locations of the city, there are data centers, 3 different data centers where your data are there. Data is there in the primary region. Data is there in the primary region. Zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. Your data is there. And LRS in secondary region. In any one of the data center, your data is there in secondary region. Now, how it works? Let's see. By default, the secondary region is not available to read or write access. So secondary region is always LRS, right? LRS means local redundant storage. So that means in maybe 3 devices in the secondary region, you have your data copied. LRS, it will follow the LRS in the secondary region. So that is not available for read and write. I mean, you cannot read and write from that. That is just a backup kind of a thing. So how it works? If the primary region becomes unavailable, something went wrong in the primary region, something went wrong in Pune data centers. Now you can choose the second region to failover. You can go and select your failover as second region. And then what happens? Once failover is completed, it will take some time to do all the DNS change and all those things, right? So your second region will become your primary region, right? So all this would happen in the backend. Once that failover is completed, the secondary region becomes primary region. Post that, you can read and write data. You getting it? So your secondary region remains as a backup for you, and it will follow the LRS. Okay, now couple of notes here. The recent writes to the primary, let's say at 10 o'clock, the data has been written to the primary region at 10 o'clock. Now, and the last write to the secondary region is known as, so the write completed in the second region at 10:15, for example. So 10 o'clock primary region, it has written the data, the new data from your application, and by 10:15 it has completed writing the data to the secondary region, for example. Now this is known as recovery point objective, RPO. Now what is RPO? Azure Storage typically has an RPO of less than 15 minutes. So I know last recovery point objective. So in the second region, it has the backup of 10 o'clock, for example. In the primary, you getting it? So RPO of less than 15 minutes. Azure Storage typically has an RPO of less than 15 minutes. That means within 15 minutes, less than 15 minutes, your data is put back to the secondary region. Okay, so although currently there is no SLA on how long it takes to replicate data to secondary region, but this is typically what happens. Within 15 minutes, the data is replicated to your secondary region. Next, let's learn about Geo-Redundant Storage, or popularly known as GRS. Now, GRS copies your data. How it functions, we have to understand. The Geo-Redundant Storage copies your data 3 times with a single data center. So in a data center, you have imagine 3 hard drives. So your data first getting written to the first hard drive, then second hard drive, and third hard drive. It is all happening in the same data center, in one data center. Okay, using LRS. So it doesn't use ZRS, zone redundant storage. It uses LRS. Remember this very important point. In GRS, it uses LRS in the primary region, and next copies data to single data center in a secondary region using LRS. Then the same thing using LRS, it again copies in the secondary region to 3 different devices or hard drives. Getting it? Okay. GRS offers durability of Azure storage data object of at least 16 nines. So LRS we heard 11. In ZRS we saw 12 nines, and here in this one it is 16 nines durability. Okay, now let's see about Geo-Zone-Redundant Storage. So this is pretty simple. GZRS, known as data copied to primary region as per ZRS, zone redundant storage. So what happens in zone redundant storage? Are you able to recall? So zone redundant storage means you have in one city, for example Pune, it has got 3 availability zones. That means in Pune there are three different locations where you have zones. So your data is there in 3 different data centers in a single city. Okay, so data copied to primary region as per ZRS. Next, copies data to a single data center in secondary. So in LRS, even though there are multiple, it will only copy the data to any single data center, and there it will follow LRS, locally redundant storage, in 3. Always keeps the data in 3 devices in that data center. You getting it? Now here in GZRS also, it is designed to provide at least 16 nines of durability of object over a given year. You getting it? So 69. This is also same. ZRS and GZRS are both same 16 nines. The last point that is remaining is read access to data in secondary region. Now what is this? Enable read access. So by default, the secondary region data is not enabled for read access when I go with GRS or GZRS. So there is another thing, you can enable read access. If you enable read access, what happens? Your data is always available even if the primary region is running. Okay, in ZRS, GZRS, right, all these things GRS and GZRS, the secondary region data is not available to read. Okay, it will be there, but you cannot read it. But you can go for this RAGRS, read access geo-redundant storage. That means in the secondary also you can read the data. And also you can go with read access with Geo-Zone-Redundant Storage, GZRS, where you can read the data. But here the only thing as a caution, the secondary reason data may not be up to date because of RPO at the time you are accessing it. Okay, because there is always a data is getting replicated to the second region and there could be a delays there. That is the only thing. So with this, we have completed all the contents of this particular chapter.